Hey there, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Todd C. Slater, the Simple Investor, and this time is the time for our real estate talk triangle. Hey, by the way, if you don't know, we do this every single month, and my two panelists that are going to be joining me here in studio this week, as usual, I've got Tim Sirianos joining me. Tim is the broker owner of RE/MAX Ultimate. Also, he's a former president of the Toronto Real Estate Board, as well as a former director at the Canadian Real Estate Association. And one name I'm sure you know by now, Dave Butler. That's right. Dave Butler is a mortgage specialist broker, definitely my go-to guy. And so we're going to have a lot of fun today. We've got a lot to talk about. Wow, what a week in the world of real estate. But most importantly, coming up this next weekend, that's right, November the 4th. Have you marked it on your calendar? Well, I know a bunch of people did. I have our Simple seminar coming up at 11 a.m. on Saturday. And you know what's making this one so exciting, of course, is we're doing the great down payment giveaway. That's right. Somebody, actually not just one person, two people are going to end up winning a down payment for a one-bedroom unit. The down payment worth $56,000. That's right. In one of our developments, we're really excited about this. Now, we were originally saying, hey, listen, do you want to join us in our seminar room? Well, you know what? We are to the rafters. We got full capacity, but that doesn't mean you don't have a chance to win on our webinar. That's right. So make sure you tune in. It's going to be really simple. Do it from the comfort of your own home, and you could have a chance of winning a down payment for your very own investment property. We got a lot to do during the seminar. I got news for you. We got some great stuff, new release, everything going on. So it's going to be a wonderful day. So go to thesimpleinvestor.com and make sure that you are taking part of this incredible event. But as I mentioned, you know, one of the things that I try to do as much as possible is educate everybody about what's going on in the world of real estate. And so instead of me always just being the talking head, we put together the Real Estate Talk Triangle years ago. And my two panelists that join me every single month, I got to tell you, I can't do it without them. They are definitely just, I consider them the encyclopedia and the sources and a dictionary of all real estate. I've got Tim Sirianos and Dave Butler. Guys, welcome in.
Great to be back.
Awesome. It's always good to be around you guys, man. This is actually the funnest part of my month usually.
Yeah.
So.
And we talk before the show and after the show. I mean, we can be here for like several hours sometimes.
Yeah, you know, I just don't know if they're going to give us enough time here. At maybe we should start our own simple podcast somewhere, and then that way we can go forever.
Sprinkle that in there. For
yeah,
sure.
Why not? So, all right, guys. So listen, we'll start off with, as Tim, you said, you know, breaking news. Well, it's going to break something. Not sure what the news is though. Let's talk about interest rates, Bank of Canada. Tim, I'll start off with you. Typical real estate reaction in the world of real estate.
Well, it's been an interesting month so far. There's been a lot of anticipation of what's going to happen. It's been one of the biggest conversation pieces. Has the bank, stopped its upward, trajectory of interest rates? And what's going to be next, right? What's going to take to actually have them stop? Because there's definitely a big impact on the market generally, happening in the Greater Toronto area. Like this past month, I could say that, we've seen about a month worth of inventory apply to the marketplace. So we used to be at, say, 2.5 months of inventory. Now we're at 3.5, 3.7 months. And for those of us that want to get kind of reminded what that is that if a single home did not go on the market in that time period, there'd be nothing for sale. But what's been really happening too at the same time is, yes, we're having one of the biggest, Western Mexican standoffs going on right now this past month. Sellers are staring at buyers. Buyers are circling the wagons. They're saying, do I smell blood? Do I see blood? Do I taste blood? Sellers are saying, not here. I'm sorry. Move on to something else, right? And the good properties, renovated, homes that are priced in the current environment are selling. We are, believe it or not, some homes after a week getting a couple of offers on them at the same time. But overall, though, just to be real about the marketplace, it is that kind of stare down going on between buyer and seller, and sales are completely, been suppressed because of that.
So, Tim, when we talk about interest rates, of course, that's a big driver. Do you think the fact that if we stay in neutral for a little while longer, people will then kind of absorb the feeling saying, okay, you know what, it's something we're going to work with. These are the numbers we're looking at. Do you think, because there's a bunch of buyers out there, they want to buy. Like there's pent up demand. I mean, we hear it, we know it. People sitting on the fence forever, it just doesn't happen. Like we saw that different times over the last decade where, people would sit on the fence and all of a sudden, the market would pop. We all of a sudden have this ricochet effect.
It's it's a conversation that I just had on my way to studio. I was saying that this market has demonstrated over the past 2 years, post lockdowns, how resilient it really is. And when you go from 121,000 sales to 90 to 85, and now we're probably targeting somewhere around 70, right? Instead of 75 last year, 78, we're going to be around 70. If we can't look at that as somebody pushing down on a spring, then I think we're really making a big mistake and not realizing that this market has shown in the past several years, it doesn't take much for buyers, the consumer, to feel that, okay, time now, right? And my biggest concern that I've been saying for quite some time is this. Yes, we are in a tough market. Like economically, there are people who are impacted by interest rates. And yes, we are in an environment where, sales have been pushed down. And yes, there's a lot of noise out there. Last month, we talked about the noise levels, of that's going on, causing a lot of anxiety. But it's not going to take much before something takes that little lever off the spring, and then everybody kind of comes back at once. And if you can't afford to buy, and if you should be constantly looking right now, right? Because I believe it's going to be a big mistake if you're trying to time the market, because you're going to mistime it badly.
Yeah, Dave, and you and I talked about this the other week about timing markets, and I remember, and if we had the recording, you'd hear Dave said that he figured that, he was, I think you were at 95% sure Bank of Canada wasn't going to do anything. I know your number was right up at the top.
Yeah, well, I mean, these days I feel like giving 100% prediction on what the Bank of Canada will do is probably not the best prognostication theory. But yeah, no, look, it's funny. I don't venture much on social media, but I remember, I was reading someone's post who is in the, real estate and mortgage field, and they had made some comment about well, even if it's a 1% drop in rates next year, that's not going to do anything. The rates are still statistically average or higher. And I said, that's, you can't just look at numbers. Sentiment is huge, right? I mean, we are in the lowest, we're probably entering, I would say, the lowest sentiment, that we've had since probably COVID, when people were locked down. And I'm just talking about in terms of real estate, right? We were all locked down. No one was doing anything. Realtors were, didn't know what they were going to do in March and April and May of 2020, right? So sentiment was down. As soon as you got that change, what happened? Now, certainly interest rates being super low at the time is going to be massive, a match to the candle, right? But sentiment, I mean, I truly do believe if you had a 1% drop in rates, I think it's not just the 1%. It's that Canadians would feel, they don't have to wake up the next day and find out the Bank of Canada's gone to raise by 0.5%. They can kind of feel comfortable knowing we are in a new kind of rate downtrend. And that's really, I think, what you need. And more importantly, I mean, right now, I have buyers come to me, and it is such a different type of client that I'm working with these days. A lot of people that know my career know I focused on working with real estate investors. That's been my niche. But real estate investors right now are sophisticated. They're sitting on the sidelines if they don't feel comfortable. They are not having to make any moves. We are dealing with more first-time home buyers, and it's weird. It's not your first-time home buyer in your 20s. This last one I just got approved yesterday is a first-time home buyer turning 39 years old, right? Feeling like, hey, I think, and when we talked, he kind of said, I feel like the Bank of Canada is getting near the end. I have lots of friends that are in really bad positions right now financially. I feel like even though my affordability level isn't great for this mortgage, I feel like in time I will be able to get myself a better rate, and this will become more affordable for me, and I'm not going to miss the boat. Because he did say one thing, and this is just a normal first-time buyer, guys. He says to me, he goes, I have a feeling once the Bank of Canada assures Canadians they're done with interest rate hikes, there's going to be a rush to buy homes.
Yeah.
Mic drop on that one, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. This is, if people start to feel that sense of normalcy, stability, okay, we hit the trough, this is it, then you're going to be caught in a place where you're going to start competing again, right? And the reality is, gentlemen, we've already had, projects and condos shelved, right? Yeah. We've already had construction, get pulled off, right? We already had some people who are going to rent out their premises, their new condo that they're purchasing, going to market with it instead. Not that much, but it's happening, right? So we're just going to be caught in the same position we were several years ago, where it's going to come out, and again, it's not going to be next month. I'm the first one to say that we're looking at spring of 2024, but there's going to be a steady, sense of that sentiment improving. Yep. And what we don't want is something sudden. And if that sudden thing happens, then it's going to start, rushing the other way.
Yeah. And the other thing I think everybody has to realize is that, let's say hypothetically, we are on the bottom right now. Now you have to start calculating what 3% increase, 4% increase, 5% increase looks like, depending on your price point. So, there are these people that are kind of stalling out saying, I'm going to wait for the interest rates to change. Yeah, but what happens if it's a $50,000 swing in the price you're paying? So let's just hypothetically say that, let's say you take a 1 year, Dave, we talk about it all the time, 1 year mortgage, and let's say your premiums are a little bit higher. Let's say even if it's $1,000, a month for the next year until you can get something a little bit more attractive. Guess what? You could be saving technically, if you wait for interest rates to come down, you could be costing yourself $100,000 more in the big scheme of things. And these are the kind of things that, folks, when you tune into the show here, we're going to unfold, and we've got a lot more for this hour. So Tim Sirianos is in the studio with me. So is Dave Butler. We've got so much more to talk about today as well. Hey, if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do it. The Simple Investor One. You're going to hear about our latest stuff that's going on in the world of real estate. So much to unpack every single week. And you know what? Hopefully you can tune in every single Sunday here at noon with us. And we'll be right back after this. And welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this portion of the show, we call it a real estate talk triangle. And my two panelists that join me every single month are in studio with me. Tim Sirianos, he is the broker owner of RE/MAX Ultimate, former president of the Toronto Real Estate Board, and as well, he used to be the director at Canadian Real Estate Association. So also Dave Butler, you know him as what I call my mortgage specialist, definitely my mortgage guru. And apparently he was a pretty good speaker in grade 7. I think he got like 4th place ribbon in some kind of speak off. So Dave, we gotta have some fun with it.
I'd say I always make fun of people with some of the bios they have right on their online, and they list like all these insane accomplishments. I was the class speaker in grade 7, so I think some of that's I usually do a parody of that on my personal Instagram account. But
that's wonderful.
So guys, just before the break, we were obviously talking about loading the spring in, and that I don't mean the season, loading the spring in real estate. Tim, you had a question for Dave.
I did. He made a very great point about a first-time buyer in the 30s, in later 30s, I guess, is what you said. 39. And it's interesting because I want to share the street level, what we're seeing with our 420 agents, right now going on. The biggest obstacle seems to be the stress test.
Yes.
So can I ask you, what are you seeing with that? Because we feel on the street that if it wasn't for the stress test or adjusted to some degree, even for first-time buyers only, it would make a difference.
Look, this particular client, both him and his girlfriend who were moving in together, they had, I believe, traditionally very large incomes. They were both 6-figure incomes. So combined income on that file. And even then it was a struggle to get him to some of the levels of some of the homes he was looking at purchasing. The cool thing about, the experience that I had with him was, we had actually started in the summer working together, and I had kept telling him, I said, look, just be cautious out there. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, you don't need to rush. You believe it or not, I know you don't think this because you're just coming off the heels of what felt like a very pressured situation in 2022, because he had almost bought then as well, he was telling me. So, but the reality is this: is he took his time, he found the market, he was working with the right real estate agent, which I think is very key here. It wasn't pressuring him to put in an offer on, just to get that sale, and he really, I think he had ended up putting in 3 offers. You know what I mean? Finally, that third offer got done. But I will say this, not particular in this scenario, but a lot of other scenarios. Really, what's come back in the mortgage world is co-signing. I mean, it has people now, when they come to us, it's funny. They will actually come to us and we'll start talking about getting them pre-approved, and they'll actually up front say, "Oh, by the way, I have a co-signer." So people are getting smarter. The fact that, look, they may not qualify, and these aren't hard conversations. You just do the math. Hey, if I can get you a rate of, let's say, 6.5 or whatever that rate is, you have to now stress test on that at 8.5. 8.5 stress tested on $700,000. The amount of income you need to qualify for that is insane. And I think a lot of people are getting rejected from their banks. I think a lot of people are getting rejected from their mortgage broker, and maybe they're not being given the options of co-signer, but people are getting smarter. And I think there's firms like ours that are saying, hey, look, you got to bring a bit more purchasing power to the table, sadly, but it is only temporary. And there's a lot of cool programs out there that banks have where you can remove co-signers once affordability comes back down and rates come down. And that's something that's very important to people.
Yeah. And look, it's stress test, I think it played its hand out well in some scenarios. For a long time, we always questioned the logic behind it. But I do believe that it has had its benefit. But if we know that, if the Bank of Canada is at their end, because, the stress test came into play more when obviously interest rates were super, super low and they knew that there was going to be upward pressure to them. But if we're at the max and we know it coming down, I agree with Tim wholeheartedly. These are conversations that we have to have. And, it's interesting because, I did a post and I had somebody, take a run at me, first of all, saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And I always love those people. And it's like, okay, I tell you what, I've only been kicking around for 30 years in the real estate world and the finance world, but that's okay. You're right. I don't know what I'm talking about. But they were quick to tell me that the Bank of Canada does not get swayed at all by the government. And I went, hang on, they're not supposed to be. But we all know in this room that there are a lot of underlying conversations and tones throughout the Canadian economy, especially when they printed so much money, that if you don't think there is side deals, back end deals, whispers in the corner, I'm sorry, we can't be that naive to think that Tiff Macklin himself and his panel are making these decisions is ludicrous. When you take a look at what's happening to the U.S. Fed, you take a look at the Bank of Canada, there is politics behind all of this. And Tim, I'm pretty sure you agree, because you're knee deep in that stuff.
I'm going to say that there's several things I want to say really quickly, right? Number one, that the idea that they're not influenced is so offside. Because, one of the great things about organized real estate that I've always been very proud of to witness is what they call PAC days, which is political action committees, right? And that is when the local board in Ontario, actually across Canada, right? The regional board, the provincial board, and the Canadian Association all have committee members, which are realtors on the street who are spending 3 to 4 days with every MP of every political party in Ottawa.
Yep.
So the idea that the government, does not know what's happening on the street and is not, the fact that I sat across MPs and they literally said, we want a hotline, right? And we want to talk daily if we can. I've witnessed that. So yeah, backdoor deals, I'm not going to say that they're backdoor deals, but the influence is 100% there, right? Which is a great thing.
Yeah, but the Bank of Canada, here, like I said, people are sitting there, and it was interesting because, Dave, you saw it where all the premiers were shoving letters at Tiff Macklin saying, hey, take a chill pill, buddy, right? And they did, and they got aggressive about it. And what happens? All of a sudden, it's like, oh no, we see reason to put a pause in there. Oh, is it because you came up with that yourself, Tiff?
Yeah, it's politics and monetary fiscal policy combined together always kind of gets things a little muddy, right? And I think you can even see, I think one of the most, what was interesting things the other day when they put through the Bank of Canada announcement was that there seems to be a little bit of now blaming each other. Like, one of the main things Tiff said was, one of the issues contributing to our higher inflation is this excessive government spending. Like, he actually said that. That was a statement in their remarks. Then you've got one of the other people coming in saying, look, I'm going to tell you the truth. And this is the person that comes in to speaks right after Tiff says, even though interest rates are high, it's not doing the job. We really do have a supply issue. So all these real estate bears that were always like, we don't have a supply issue. Rates have caused this. Rates are going to get us out of it. Da, da, da. Well, but wait, you have the government, you have the people that literally make those decisions now stepping up and saying, honestly, like, no, we have a massive supply issue. And then you got Tiff saying government's spending too much and causing these issues. This is humongous. No central banks, I believe, have ever actually said that. So I thought it was really, I thought these were like insane statements to read yesterday.
Yeah, and this is the thing that we have to take a look at. So when we take a look at decisions that are being made, you do look at, of course, inflation. You look at what kind of gross product are we putting out there? What kind of wages are we looking at? And then when they turn around, and Dave, you caught this because it's like now we forced the minimum wage up. What did that do? Well, there was a trickle effect because if you were within a certain percentage of the minimum wage, you were also forced to increase it. So let's say somebody was getting $1.50 more than minimum wage at the time, but minimum wage almost caught up. No matter what, you had to give them a raise of that amount. So when people start talking about wages and the fact that they're going up, which is potentially increasing inflation, it's like, this is government driven. Great. We need to make sure everybody gets a good salary, but out of the gate, I mean, you can't keep applying these kind of pressures to the economy and expect that something's not going to give.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, I think we're all as Canadians. I mean, I don't like Tim. Like, do you remember in your guys' like Todd in your guys' career has inflation, aside from in the 70s and 80s, been this major of a discussion? Like, this is like, we've reached a whole new level, I think, and not just in Canada, it also appears to be in other, G7 countries where we're experiencing similar things. I just, things seem very, very intermingled. And, I think, and I'm not the only one, and it's not like a political party I particularly, am for. I'm for getting back to some balance again. It feels like we are literally in one end of the spectrum and then the other a month later. The news comes out, mainstream media is coming out with all these terrible headlines. I think we just need to get a semblance of balance again.
Yeah. And speaking of balance, we got to balance this show off with a couple of breaks. But when we come back, we'll have more with my two panelists. So stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back. So this part of the show, we call it the Real Estate Talk Triangle. We do it every single month. My two panelists that have been joining me for years now, always great to have them on board. Yeah, you know what? I do have the number one mortgage specialist. He is on one side. We've got Dave Butler in-house, and Dave's always great for the information. And then on the other side, I've got Tim Sirianos. He is the owner of RE/MAX Ultimate. Also, he is a former president of the Toronto Real Estate Board. Guys, it's always fun having these conversations, and when we start digging in on the government. And I know a lot of people, Tim, think that, I just come out and I start swinging at the government and I'm complaining, but, it's factual. And when the newest mayor in Toronto whips it out and says, I'm going to build 65,000 homes, over the next 7 years. And by the way, we expect the private sector to come in, and we want them to build an extra, not just build, but an extra 220 homes on top of that. 30%. Like, she wants them to increase their production 30% per year. I don't know where these people get off, but you know what? She's not even close on this one.
When I read that, I was quite surprised that that bold statement was made, especially when the targets are already being missed in every single way. And especially after you hear what's been going on at the provincial government when, rightly or wrongly, perceptually or factually, they reverse course on the Greenbelt. And they don't stop there. They actually go deeper and they start reversing already approved project developments that are already in municipalities to go forward. And, the municipalities are saying, whoa, you're going too far. Like these are legit. Well, we don't know which ones are legit, so we're going further back. So that 35,000 or 65,000 or 120,000 or even 2,000 is now exponentially, skewed as a number. I really feel distressed inside many times when I hear these things, because I have to come on show like this and break the real news that it's not going to happen. And the last thing I've ever wanted to sound like, and you guys, you both know this, is a salesperson, right? That
Never.
I've always come here and been real. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I care about them buying real estate in the future. I talk about investors openly and speculations and everything else. And we want a balanced market. We want everybody to participate, right? But these types of things, you have to start looking at government and going back to finding the root of every problem, right? When you look at when rent control started back when it did, it was a conservative government that introduced it.
Right.
You can't say, it was a left or middle. It was actually a right, So, there are governments that introduce these things. But that stopped purpose-built rentals. That stopped construction in many ways. And it forced life to grow somewhere else. Then we had the phenomenon called condominiums, right? That started in the 90s. And that's where everything started driving. And municipalities started approving units that were too small for people to live in. But they were perfect to replace the purpose-built rental. And now we have, when I drive down the DVP and across the Garden Expressway and underneath to get to York Street, to go to Harbor Square, where our head office is for the condos division, right? Condos Plus. I'm surrounded by buildings. I don't see the sun, right? So that's the world that we're living in right now. So you have to go back and unravel everything and say, where we go from here? We have to start approving proper places to build, and fast. And you got to have a real conversation. Somebody has to challenge Madam Mayor right now and talk about the conversation with the provincial government that's being unraveled, right? And how are we going to fix this? Because that's not going to happen. And there's going to be a lot of frustrated people getting angry and angry as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we also have to do is with some of these politicians is change the light bulb so it'll actually turn on. Because quite frankly, they're missing the point. And and let's talk about an example that came out in the news. And this one, this is staggering. And I talk about the game of Monopoly and where people need to buy real estate, right? And to me, you don't really truly win if people think that if you own Boardwalk, you're always going to win the game of Monopoly. But the truth is, you need to own the stuff that you're going to land on. People are going to rent. The cheaper stuff. That's the stuff that actually makes sense. So let's talk about One Young. So they called it One. Okay, huge development. Mizrahi development just ended up going into receivership at $1.6 billion. Bought it like it was going to, and overpaid the land, Tim. I don't know if you remember the transactions.
I do.
$350 million for stuff. You go, what? And it was all because it was deemed Boardwalk. Yep. And then when you start turning around and build, and then you go through the delays. And by the way, folks, no matter what, we can sit there and talk about construction and congestion, but imagine you're building 91 stories in dead center Toronto, having to block off streets to be able to haul up steel girders, turn around and put this thing. I mean, the cost of construction itself will escalate no matter what. And when you start looking at stuff at over $2,000 a square foot, and now all of a sudden it's going, they're going into receivership and they say, yeah, we're going to keep building. We're only halfway there, but you're 1.6 billion in debt.
So this is not a new story. Like, this has been a story for at least 5 or 6 years minimum. And we've been waiting in the industry for week by week, month by month of when, surprise is still going up, right? But what really happened there is also the fact that you lost all your anchor tenants. You had a pandemic that you lost the biggest Apple store that was going to be there and other things that were going to be there. It so happens that our brokerage represented the retail, the parts of the retail component there. Some of our agents did in our office and our commercial division. So we saw this thing really, happening over time. It's not a surprise. No. We can't blame the current environment for this happening. It finally happened. This should have happened 4 years ago.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Tim, is that, again, it's that interpretation of owning, like I say, Boardwalk, right? It's if we talk about, it doesn't matter if it's a condominium for your lifestyle or if it's going to be for rental. The truth is that there comes a time where you're stretching too far. And this, I believe, right out of the gate. So when he started accumulating this land in like 2010, 2013, because he started buying up all the parcels, at that point, I think it was a no-go. I mean, basically, like you're reaching for something, and everybody wants to have that feather in the cap. But if you take a look at every single major development across the world on all these major cities, when they push too far, they normally come crumbling down. Yeah. I mean, look at Canary Wharf and the Reichmans. I mean, there is the quintessential destruction in the 80s of somebody reaching too far.
They basically went, they were selling it as the lifestyle, and people who bought in that development actually wanted that lifestyle. But there were people in there who thought that lifestyle would be something even more special in the years to come. I didn't see that. I mean, I've been in the business for 34 years. From the day one, I didn't see it being that, right? But they did. And, I'm just curious to see who's going to, it's in receivership. It has to finish.
Yeah.
You can't stop at floor 40 right now. Like you got to do something. I mean, back in the early 90s when condominiums were the newest and greatest thing, there were people who bought 5-6 condominiums in one shot. Yep. And it didn't get past the garage level. Like there are still buildings in Toronto that are glorified garages because the condo stopped at the garage and never went any further, right? In this case, you can't stop where it stopped. You got to go. I mean, is the government going to get involved here? Like, what's going to happen? Like, you think about it. People have to get paid. Yep. Banks will take only so much of a loss, right? But we have to get this address completed somehow.
Well, talk about speculation. I mean, we talk about all the time about investors speculating, buying these new builds. I don't think people realize that, some of these builders, some of them are making insane speculative bets on things and doing sometimes things when you wouldn't think they shouldn't. When markets are overheated and seem maybe overheated and they're going $22 million. I looked at it, there was like one of those units was $22 million you had to buy it for. Like, how is that helping? First of all, how's that helping get more people in Toronto into homes? You know what I mean? And but we saw that was the boom. That was the piece, that kind of final 5-6 years there where things started to get out of hand, and you can see people, businesses that have been doing this for so long started even making speculative bets, which just goes to show we entered kind of a weird phase of investment there.
I think that when ego takes over common sense, that's what happens.
Yep. So with that thought, and speaking of ego, I'm going to take mine to the next break. But when we come back, we're going to have more. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back. So it's amazing how fast an hour goes when I have my two panelists in studio with me. We've got Dave Butler, #1 mortgage broker in Canada. We've got Tim Sirianos. I call him #1 no matter what. Doesn't matter, but his staff do at Remax Ultimate for sure. And Tim is also a former president of the Toronto Real Estate Board. Guys, just before the break, I threw out One Young because that's kind of that piece that made a lot of headlines. And a lot of people are sitting there saying, how is this possible? And, I as somebody that's starting to build and develop properties, one of the most important things I think most people should be aware of is the fact that if you're paying, when you start thinking of levels of quality, a lot of people want to have, granite, stainless, 9-foot ceilings. Basically, you want to be able to walk, and you want your unit to do everything for you. That's all well and good, but let's talk about reality. Okay, reality is that somebody needs, warmth, shelter, nice sealed unit, obviously pest free, that kind of thing. But when some of these builders get to that extreme and everybody's hopping on that bandwagon, it becomes very faddish. And at the end of the day, I think most people should just be happy about owning something or living in something that's safe. And, Dave, one of the things that you and I have seen actually, and I'd say almost over the last 2 years, is that there's a lot of people, and we call them first-time home buyers, but a lot of first-time home buyers have realized that market's a little bit out of reach. So what we've done is we've seen a shift in the age. So people around their 20s and 30s, I've seen more people investing in real estate. So in the last little while, I have seen a much younger group of people buying investment real estate saying to me, look at Todd, it makes sense. I can't afford my home yet, but I can afford a little investment property. So I'm going to buy that, get my feet wet, and start seeing the growth in real estate no matter what, because real estate's still real estate if you live in it or if you rent it.
Look, there's some people that can see through the volatility parts of the cycles, right? I mean, it's funny you bring that up, man. There, one kid in particular, he's one of your investors. He's a simple investor. client of yours. He came, young kid, 1 year out of university, but right away with the idea that he wants to invest. And it was, and we were talking when we originally kind of had our call, and he seemed so bright. He was really nailing down the fact that, look, he goes, look, I'm in a position right now where my job where I live, it just doesn't make my job I have to still go into work. I'm not going to be able to go and buy that home that I need to buy for me where I'm at. But you know what? I want to get in the market. I don't want to fall behind. And I really liked, he really had a very, it was a very refreshing attitude from some of the, more, I guess, some of the people that felt so weird. Because think about it, in 2021, a lot of these people were like, I want to invest, but I can't invest because the prices are too high. And it's really forced people to actually truly look at investment as an investment and not as some fad. And to your point, yeah, he very young kid, 1 year out of university, got his full-time job, and he goes and he buys one of your properties. He actually just closed about a month ago, and really loved the attitude of this kid. Now he closed. He already sent me an email. Hey, I want to sit down and talk. Even though I know I can't buy right away, I want to plan for the next couple of years. How much should I save? What should I do? And I was a very, very refreshing conversation from the craziness that we were dealing with back in 2021.
If you don't mind me jumping in here, what I love about this story, number one, that he went to Simple Investor. No, but seriously, this is an amazing conversation to have between, the evil idea of investing in real estate, right? And it's something that we need to continuously talk about, because if you sit down with somebody and you talk about mutual funds, and you're planning, your RSP, or you have children, you're planning RESP. You go to your work, you get a job, you pay your tax at the end of the year, and you have some money left over, and now you want it to plan for you, so when you retire or when you have children, there's something better for them, right? So maybe this young person or other people, they buy a condo or a property of any kind, and the whole idea for them is to say they're going to help their children one day, right? But in the meantime, where are they putting that property? In the rental pool, right? Yep. So we have to distinguish the difference between spec and investing. And every day we wake up and we want to have a good retirement. We want to have a better life. We want to leave something for our children in the future, or maybe for charity you want to leave it. I mean, there are people who will work an entire lifetime and donate all they've done to charity, right? So it doesn't matter. It's just that we have to make that distinction between good and bad when it comes to investing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. And honestly, shout out to, I won't say his last name, but shout out to Aiden. I mean, I think it's really, for someone like myself, I'm in my 40s now. It's really refreshing to see that attitude, because like I said, I really do feel like things changed. And I do also feel like, one of the things that I find most impressive about, and I know because we're on his show, but this is Todd and the way he runs Simple Investor. It is about affordability, and it always has been. It always has been for where you can find the most bang for your buck. And also, I guess, as well, he's first year out of university working at a job. He's not going to have a lot of time to deal with some of these things. He's in downtown Toronto. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Simple Investor's product worked great for him. Guess what? He doesn't have to deal with the tenants. That's all already hand done for him. So, it goes to show people are getting smarter. But sadly, I think, as we can probably all agree, the ratio, seems to be getting lower. And that's, so it's kind of weird, because it's surprising when you see it, but you like it.
And just one, last fun fact, of course, and the three of us have always been talking about immigration. And, some recent stats that are coming out, we're fast approaching 40% of all Canadian residents now rent. That used to be 33, and now as the numbers continue to change, it continues to go up. There is some projections that are coming out right now that within the decade will be over 50% of all residents will be renting. And yet here's the problem. There's no way we can build that many. So folks, when you see all this advertisement from the different governments, the federal government, you see the provincial government promising all these things, it's great that these promises are being made, but quite frankly, they just can't sustain or make them happen. And yet they're not pulling back on the immigration. Tim, you and I have talked about it in length in the past. There's no way we're going to be able to build or keep up with our current work environment and the amount of people that are going to retire. I don't know what they're going to do, but can we sit there and tell the government, maybe close the borders for a little while?
My position on that is very clear, and I use my own cousin who's in Europe, who left the hospitality business from Greece, right? He made cocktails all day, right? I mean, that's 35 million people a year go to that country, right? Anyways, he left and he went to Amsterdam. And he immigrated there because he wanted a better job, a better life, a better opportunity. And when he went there, the policies they have in that country is that, you know, you're sponsored with a corporate entity. Like, you're actually going to be trained as an electrician, some form of trade. You know, you're going to be, I don't want to use the word owned by that company. It's a contract, right? Yep. And you know, that company's going to make a huge investment in that person. And they're going to commit, you know, 3, 4, 5 years back, you know, to that company. So immigration can work if you have a plan with it. And that's where I'm going with this, right? I'm a child of an immigrant family. Immigration's amazing. I'm blessed to be in Canada, but it's also a blessing to have this tough conversation about immigration right now. Yep. Because the right immigration is very important, right? Just bringing people in who are not going to fulfill the needs of any country. Because, you know, by 2030, I think 30% of the population will be retired age. That's trades. Yep. So if you know these stats, listen, CMHC knows these stats. Yeah, right? Bank of Canada knows these stats. The government knows. How are you acting on them? Are you just allowing people to have temporary visas, coming in here for education and becoming a permanent resident? Or are you actually having the proper, you know, process and then engaging the private sector? Engaging the private sector to have these people trained and employed where we need them the most.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, listen, Tim, well put, and I think most people understand that 100%. Tim, Dave, as usual, great having you here in studio with me. Can't wait to, you know, it's going to be interesting as we start to wind out the year and how everything starts to develop. And of course, I'm going to be leaning on Tim for all the numbers and find out how we finish up the year.
I'm prepping.
And speaking of numbers, hey, you know what? How much does it cost to buy an investment property? Well, guess what? It may cost you nothing. That's right. If you had a chance to win the down payment for a 1-bedroom unit in London at our newest release, would you do it? Well, I'll tell you what, that chance is coming up. Of course, it's this Saturday, November the 4th at 11 a.m. You can join me for my simple seminar webinar. We are completely stacked for the seminar, so you can join us online with the webinar, and you may be one of the lucky winners of a down payment for an investment property. Go to thesimpleinvestor.com to find out more. And that's a wrap for this week. And I just want to thank my producers, Aiden and Omar. They kept it simple for me, as they always do. More importantly, I want to thank you for tuning in, making us the #1 real estate talk show. And of course, I'll be back next Sunday as usual. I'm your host, Todd C. Slater. You've been listening to Simply Real Estate right here on News Talk 1010 Toronto.